you're listening to My Alien Life.
So those kind of speeds exist in our galaxy, and this object came from outside of our solar system. Having a large relative velocity, remember objects in our solar in the galaxy are moving with relative velocities on average of between 200 and 300 kilometers per second, which is much, much faster than any object in our solar system. So any random object that wasn't part of our solar system happened to be traveling in the direction of our solar system, it could easily traverse our solar system with a speed that's incredibly large.
It had been tested on lab mice, and it didn't kill them, and so I wasn't really that leery about it.
I can see there's a fear on his face. He took off, we took off, so something was wrong there, man. Something was wrong there, man. They cut into something that they didn't know. They didn't know what was wrong there, man. And there was some problems.
My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, the My Alien Life Legends page, and much more. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron while you're checking out all the content. I'm your host, Cameron Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
How's everybody doing? Yeah, it's been a while. Glad you could all show up. I'm glad to have you back. And if we have some new people who've never listened before, glad to have you here as well. I'm Cameron Logan. This is My Alien Life, the podcast. And we haven't done one for a while. Try to get everybody catched up a little bit on what's been going on. I had this long-term COVID thing, and it's still going on. And been talking to a lot of people who've had it. A lot of people have reached out to me, and it's this thing with brain fog. Other people have it a lot worse, so I'm kind of happy to be where I'm at, not complaining. It does kind of make it difficult to do a show like this, so either I could plan a lot and take a lot of notes, or just kind of go at it like I am right now. Been having major difficulties staying focused, and that's one of the things, I guess, that I've really taken for granted over the last few months, since mid-May, I guess it was. But we'll persevere and get through it. So glad everybody's here. It's amazing, checking in on the past podcast that we did, and looking at people all over the world who are listening to this, and it's amazing that you can kind of check out when people are discovering it for the first time, and it's kind of exciting to see that. And there's a place for it. I've said many times, and I'm kind of critical because I think there's way too many podcasts out there. Somewhat in the area of like 10,000 more podcasts a day in America, something like that. The statistics are ridiculous, but you know what? If I have my listeners and my friends who enjoy it, it's worthwhile, and it's not too much out of my normal schedule for me to do this. To do it right, it's a huge amount of time, but we'll get it. We'll meet you somewhere in the middle on that. And so thanks everybody for being here. Got a great show tonight. It's the weirdest thing when people actually contact me, and want to be on the show. It's very flattering. I love that part of it, and makes it a lot easier for me. One of the biggest hurdles that I face is trying to find new and fresh guests. Obviously, I kind of like to stick to the paradigm, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I deviate a little bit from time to time. So thank you very much. If you want to be on the show and you have some suggestions or whatever, any way you can help, I'll take it. And the goal, of course, for me and for us should be get somebody on and talk to somebody new. So that's what we're doing tonight. My special guest, and we'll meet him in a moment, is Vincent Field. Vincent has authored a book which details the journeys of an out-of-body explorer over a span of 2 decades as he navigates through higher dimensions, encounters and interacts with non-physical entities, and gains life-changing insights into the nature of the self and reality. The book is called Astral Projection and Lucid Dreaming, Spiritual Revelations and Out-of-Body Experiences in Higher Dimensions, a complete guide to exploring non-physical reality. And Vincent's here tonight. Are you really a skateboarder, or is that a cut and paste thing?
Yeah, I've been skateboarding since I was a teenager, and on and off. But I do all sports. I mean, volleyball, football, baseball, skateboarding, surfing, team sports, extreme sports.
And the paranormal. Just to add, that's like I always call out these overachievers, because I mean that's a lot of things, and people who definitely do what you did, write a book. You always have a few other little hobbies, but it seems people that are writers are big time overachievers. Do you feel like you're that? It's okay.
Well, I definitely aim to succeed in everything I do. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that could be an accurate label for sure. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I definitely strive to do my best. I mean, that's my main goal.
Yeah, that's cool. So you wrote me and you said you've been experiencing paranormal stuff and spiritual experiences for over 20 years. So you look young. You're still in your 20s.
I appreciate the compliment. I'm 36.
36. So, but for more than half your life, you've been experiencing stuff that we consider paranormal. What's the first time you remember that? I mean, did it come to you, or did you go to it?
It was when I was 14 years old. I was browsing the internet, and I came across a website talking about out-of-body experiences. And, at that point, I had never heard of this concept. And I thought it was so fascinating. And, I wanted to do it. So I found a technique, and, I tried every night for less than a week. I was able to leave my body. And, essentially, out-of-body experiences or astral projection is a paranormal experience in and of itself, because you experience, another level of reality. And, in these higher dimensions that you experience during out-of-body experiences, you can encounter all these, different types of entities, like you mentioned, shadow beings and aliens and, ghosts and things like that. So, yeah, when I was 14, I got into that, and I've been doing that ever since.
So what did you stumble upon back then? I mean, you grew up in an era mostly, there's a lot of internet available for a long time now. Seems to me like it kind of popped up overnight, but what really stood out? What information did you grip and really latch onto?
Well, back then, it was like the early days of the internet. So, the standard website would take 10 minutes to load, and there wasn't a lot of information available back then, 1999, 2000. And so, I found what I could, which wasn't a lot, but, I took that and I did something with it. So it was essentially a few excerpts, people sharing their experiences and, a technique or two to try to induce the experience yourself. So yeah, I took that, I ran with it, and it worked.
Right. Did you ever read about something called Theosophy, which they claim to have had what they call 7 bodies from a lowest physical to the highest physical or spiritual or mental body? Did you read anything about that? I mean, that's old stuff. Dr. Susan Blackmore. You can read about, taming the astral body and things like that with this, about this Theosophical Society that goes all the way back to 1875. People were kind of experimenting, not so much what you're talking about, but a different plane of being in existence, and people had recognized that back then that for that long that we have this ability. I mean, which is a very, very profound thought, even when you go back to the turn of the century. So was this something that historically you felt that, there was information, you were able to do this, or did you said it took about a week. Did it come on all of a sudden? Were you able to study and then figure that out, or did it kind of figure you out?
Yeah, these older schools of thought and systems of belief, I didn't become familiar with until years and years after I started this. And so I essentially, practiced one particular technique every day for maybe 4 or 5 days straight. And then it worked. And from there, I just, I went on my explorations, just gaining my own firsthand experience out in these other dimensions. And, later on, I would start to read books by other, explorers of consciousness and, other systems of belief that delve into this area. And this later learning of these other sources of information kind of helped to confirm my own experiences.
So one of the things that I don't know if you stumbled upon this as well, is that for some people, this can open up extremely positive occurrences or examples, or extremely negative happenings that can profoundly affect you and take you to places that really you don't want to go. What were your first experiences like? Can you give me a really, really vivid example of what happened and how it affected you later?
Sure. My initial experiences were more of the negative type, simply because, typically when you begin this practice of, exploring these other dimensions, you typically have access to mainly the lower dimensions. And over time, with development and, evolution of your consciousness through practice, you begin to access higher and higher dimensions. But, in the beginning, it's most common to project into the lower realms, which is where you will find most of the negative type of entities. And so one of my first experiences out of my body, I was face to face with this huge shadow being. I floated out of my body, and this entity was just right next to my bed, just facing me. And it was so frightening because at that time, I wasn't expecting this, and I had no idea that some kind of entity like this even existed. And, it scared me right back into my body. And so over the course of, months or even years, I would encounter entities like this. And it wasn't until I learned to project into higher dimensions that I stopped encountering these lower dimensional entities.
Did you ever run into the same one?
Well, as far as the shadow beings, they all pretty much look the same. I don't think there's really a way to tell if it's the same exact entity or not. I mean, I've had encounters with multiple shadow beings. They're standing side by side, like in a group. So it's not just one. It's definitely they're definitely out there, and it seems like they kind of feed on your fear. And after these shadow beings, I began experiencing encounters with entities that looked a lot like aliens, like your typical gray alien. They had orange skin, like a light orange skin. It wasn't gray, but the rest of their appearance was your typical alien. And these guys essentially stalked me for quite some time. And it was always the same group. And they would essentially be waiting for me once I left my body. And sometimes they would find me while I was already out of my body and in some other dimension exploring. And these guys, they resonated with this energy that was just sinister. Like you could sense like an evil coming off of them in a way that it's hard to describe. But once you're out in these other dimensions, it's like you have a direct connection with truth and knowledge and energy and information. It's not like here where you have to kind of, take secondhand sources of information and interpret things. It's more of a direct experience. And so, there have been many negative encounters like this over the years, but as my progress, and development increased over the years, these negative encounters became, frequently less and less, and I began penetrating into higher dimensions of reality in which the experiences became way more profound and enlightening and just beyond words, beyond physical concepts.
People who have studied a way to project, a lot of them expect to do this as a form of escape or a form of travel, to basically just to go somewhere else. Did you expect that, or did you expect to see something that would be life-changing, other than just traveling?
Yeah, well, my goal has always been discovering the true nature of reality, the true nature of myself, nature of life. And so it wasn't so much of an escape as it was a means to learn these things that we typically are ignorant of, we don't have access to while we're grounded in the physical body.
So when you say the nature of reality, do you believe that there's something else in the background that moves us, or do you think that we move the background? I mean, what did you expect to see, and what do you mean by the nature of the reality?
Well, what I've come to discover is that reality itself, not just this physical dimension, this physical world, and, our physical bodies and these minds and these identities that we currently, identify with, but even beyond that, these higher dimensions that you project into during these out-of-body experiences, they're rooted in a spiritual reality that is so much higher than this level of reality that we experience right now. And you gain the firsthand experience that you are not just this one particular individual having this physical life on earth, but you are a being of consciousness so much more vast and powerful than most people can even fathom. And having that experience, it is life-changing. And there are many revelations that I've come to learn over the years about, like I said, the nature of reality. Is it just this physical world? Is there more beyond it? Is there an afterlife? How does it work? How does it all interconnect? Things like this you can experience firsthand.
Do you feel that the answers are there? I mean, can you explore that? Do you feel that you have the capability, and is it possible?
Yeah, definitely. Especially once you start to access these higher dimensions, you experience like a unification with God, with all of creation, with the source of knowledge, like with truth. And once you open up that connection, there's no doubt about it that it's true and that it's real. And it's something that we don't experience here in this physical world, in these physical bodies. So, it might be hard to convince someone who hasn't had these experiences, but, my goal has never been to convince others that it's real. It's been more to, help people who are interested to have these experiences themselves.
During these experiences, do you feel that you're safe? Is there the possibility of physical harm, or whatever form you take? Is there a possibility of harm?
Well, in my experience, yes. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. And, a lot of people don't have the experience of that. But I've had experiences of being attacked by entities out of my body and coming back into my body. I've sustained physical injury in my body. So it's not just a spiritual attack, but it kind of transfers over into the physical body too. But I mean, these experiences have been very rare. And, the amount, not just the quantity, but the quality of the incredible, profound, like life-changing experiences more than makes up for the handful of these negative encounters over the years. But of course, it's just like this physical world. You have the good side and the bad side, and that carries over into these other dimensions as well. So, anyone who's saying it's just all love and light, and anything negative you experience out there is just your own mind projecting onto itself, that's not the case.
You're using the terms higher dimensions and other dimensions. In your personal opinion, how many dimensions are there, and how many dimensions are we capable of experiencing?
Well, in my experience, it would be nearly impossible to actually count all the dimensions. Essentially, reality exists in a spectrum. And so you can consider the physical dimension as the base level, and then all of non-physical reality exists above that or higher than that in terms of, the energetic frequency of it. And so even the lower astral dimensions, where you can experience, more of these negative types of entities and things like that, these are still situated higher in the spectrum than the physical dimension. But I mean, it's more a matter of, once you're out there, you can shift into higher dimensions, and this because of the characteristics and the qualities of the level of reality and of your own consciousness that you experience at that particular moment. And there are techniques you can use to shift into higher dimensions and even shift back down into lower dimensions. And so, over the years of experimenting and having these experiences and these different levels of reality, you can distinguish approximately your situation in this spectrum, whether you're in a lower, a medium level, or higher dimension. And counting the dimensions, it just doesn't make sense to me, just because there seems to be such a almost like an infinite variety of different levels of reality you can experience and shift through. And some schools of thought say there's 7 levels, 9, 11, and that's never really been my focus, to map it out exactly like that.
Let's talk about what we would consider the physical reality, and by definition, from what we come up with from physics and astronomy and planetary exoplanets, galaxies. When we see that, of course, we've been taught for a long, long time that there's a possibility of other dimensions, sure, but the dimension we're in could also contain other beings other than ourselves. So do you believe that in the conscious, we're talking to each other in a dimension, and do you believe that we share our existence with other beings that are bipedal, and you mentioned these aliens, or are they part of this dimension or somewhere else, or have you experienced aliens like gray aliens in this existence, in this dimension?
The most I've experienced here in this physical world has been UFO sightings. I've had several, over the span of my life, starting from when I was a teenager. And, I do believe there are other intelligent beings, in this universe. And it simply just makes sense given, the size of it all. And also the reports of other people, over the years claiming to have real physical encounters with these other types of beings, intelligent entities here in the physical world. There's no doubt in my mind that they exist. So, I don't have firsthand experience with them, but the entities that I encountered out of my body, particularly the ones that look like your typical aliens, I never expected to encounter them in these other dimensions. I thought they were physical entities, growing up watching shows and movies about alien abductions and stuff like that. I always thought they were just, in this dimension from another planet, riding around in these UFOs. And when I encountered them in the astral dimension, I was pretty much shocked, because honestly, I had always been afraid of them, just from watching movies and things like that over the years, reading books. I've done my share of alien abduction research, and I was always a bit frightened of these entities, just because of the fact that they appear so much more powerful than us, in the sense that they can just take us without anyone else knowing, do whatever they want with us. And yeah, that always kind of spooked me a bit. And so encountering these guys firsthand, it was definitely shocking. And I can't confirm whether the entities that I experience are actually physical beings like us, who are able to project their consciousness into these other levels of reality, or if these astral dimensions are actually like their base level of reality. I can't confirm that, but they definitely exist and operate in these higher dimensions.
So are you able to go out and strike out and locate them again? I mean, can you do this more than once and locate the same beings?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, over the years, I had never set out to encounter them, simply because I didn't want to. They would always come after me. But in a general sense, encountering any entity or any individual in these higher dimensions is simply a matter of setting your intention and allowing, the process. It might be a little complex to explain, but I'll give you an example. In my early days of exploring these higher dimensions, I had the desire to meet with my deceased great-grandmother. And I left my body, and I set the intention that I want to meet her. And the next thing I knew, I was pulled through space, like this force was just bringing me to this place. I had no idea where I was going. I had no idea what was happening. I just knew that I made this intention to meet my deceased great-grandmother. So I'm flying through space past stars and planets, and I see this light in the distance, and I get closer to the light, And I realized this is my great grandmother. It's like she's like radiating with this light. And so we're out in the far reaches of space, and we have this incredible communication and this union, and it was such an amazing experience. And the thing is, I had no idea how I would get to her. I didn't know where she was. I simply knew that I wanted to connect with her, and the experience unfolded. And I came to learn that we have these higher portions of our consciousness that we're currently unaware of, but they exist in these higher spiritual realities. And so this higher level of our own consciousness can direct our experiences during these out-of-body travels. And essentially that's what happens. So you state the intention, and if it's in alignment with your higher consciousness, then the experience will unfold. And so with the case of aliens, you can do the same thing. You set the intention. I want to encounter these aliens, leave your body, and it will happen.
You refer to higher beings, and then we talk about higher beings, and other people have these similar experiences to you. But it seems to me that we have this physical reality here, and some of us are able to do what you do, and to me that would be a signature of being a higher being, being able to project ourselves and then also be manifested physically on this earth. So is the beings that you've, including your grandmother, that you've visited, is there a limitation there? I mean, are they in that form and they can't go anywhere else, but yet we can travel at will? Do you think that we might be the higher being?
That's a pretty interesting perspective. And, I actually mentioned this, the last thing I said, in the sense that who we are is actually so much more than just our physical bodies and our identities. We have higher levels of our consciousness. And so at the highest level of our own consciousness, yes, we are these higher level entities. And I've had experiences over the years with something commonly called the higher self. And so the higher self is who we are as conscious spiritual entities, like at the highest level of our current spiritual reality. And what I've come to learn, and what I've come to also have confirmed through reading and hearing about other out-of-body explorers' experiences, is that the higher self essentially sends out probes into these lower realities, such as the physical dimension, multiple incarnations throughout time and space, to accumulate experience and learning, growth, and spiritual evolution. And so at the highest level, we are these higher level entities. And when you have this experience of unifying with the higher self, you experience yourself as this higher level entity, and you experience yourself as being one with all of these other individuals who have had or are having or will have physical lives at some point throughout history. And at that level, at this higher level, it's all simultaneous. It's like it transcends time. And so to answer your question, yes, we are. And in terms of my deceased great grandmother, essentially her base level of reality has changed. So our base level of reality is this physical world. And so, when the body dies, we essentially transcend, or, our consciousness rises to a new higher base level of reality. And, essentially it's an evolution. It's a journey of, growth and learning. And, through that process, we get to access higher and higher dimensions of reality. And through that comes new learning experiences. And it's such a difficult thing to actually explain, because at these higher levels, I mentioned before that they tend to go beyond our standard physical concepts. So sometimes it's almost impossible to accurately put into words an experience in these higher levels. But yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So when we die, we lose our earthly body, and that body decays and it's gone. And obviously we go somewhere, and hopefully it's somewhere good. When you project and you were able to see your great-grandmother, you were in a different state. Obviously, you went beyond this wall that we're normally not able to penetrate. Do you feel each time that you go into this state of projection that there's a possibility that you could lose part of yourself? Does that make sense? Because obviously we lose this physical reality and mobility and everything when we pass.
Okay, well, what your question reminds me of is some people who don't have experience of doing this firsthand, and they may have the fear that if they leave the body, they won't be able to come back, like they'll get stuck out of body. And so that's certainly never the case. I mean, the only situation that would happen is if your physical body died while you were out of your body. And I mean, in my experience, I don't believe anything could happen to you while you're out of body that would cause your physical body to die. I could be wrong, but I've never heard of it happening to anyone else. And obviously it's never happened to me. But in terms of like losing yourself, well, what I've experienced is not so much losing myself, but learning and remembering who I actually am. And as I mentioned, like this tends to happen in the higher level experiences. I've had experiences in dimensions that I could describe simply as heaven. And in these dimensions, I experience a remembering of myself before this physical life, having experiences in the same dimension that I'm in at this time, in these heavenly dimensions. I remember myself existing in these heavenly dimensions before this life. And yeah, so through that, your perspective of who you are, it totally changes, because you experience the firsthand knowledge that, you're not just this physical body and this person, with this name that your parents gave you. You're such an incredibly vast spiritual entity. It's really, like I said, it's beyond words to truly try to describe it.
But there's a timeline. I mean, obviously we're here, we die, or a physical body dies, and then we go somewhere. Is it like a tree? Are there branches of the tree? Is it like a highway? We can take a left turn, we can take a right turn, or are we always going to go to one place first? Or two places? I mean, we could talk about this biblically. We could talk about it any way you want, but, we're going to go somewhere. I believe that. Where is that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm asked this question often. Is there a difference between near-death experiences in which the person actually dies, their body dies, and they have some kind of experience in another reality? Is there a difference between that and an out-of-body experience or an astral projection. And essentially, the only difference is the state of the physical body. In one, the body is dead. In one, the body is alive and probably healthy. And so, through my experiences interacting with, family members who have died, have passed on, and being able to interact with them, encounter them in these higher dimensions, I've learned that it's essentially where we go when we die. We go into these higher dimensions of reality, and there seems to be a type of law in these higher dimensions, and it's similar to the laws of physics. You can call them the laws of non-physical reality, which is that like energy attracts. So if you are a negative person, if you're a bad person, if you continuously harbor negative emotions, if you act out in ways that hurt others, if this is your overall mindset and state of being, your state of consciousness, then when you die, you will enter a dimensional reality that resonates with the same energy, the same frequency as your own consciousness. And so, the same goes with if you're, a good, a loving person, a caring person, you will, die and enter a reality, a dimensional level that is in sync, in line with that same energetic frequency. And so this is essentially where the concepts of heaven and hell come from, because, what do you consider a hell? Well, most people can consider a hell being surrounded, by demons, being tortured. Well, where is that going to happen? Probably in a reality that is filled with people who enjoy torturing. So if you're one of those people, that's where you will go, and you'll be surrounded by other like-minded people who will be inflicting the suffering onto one another, and you will be involved in that. And, the same thing goes with, the higher dimensions and, the more loving heavenly levels. You're surrounded by people who care and love each other, and, it's a truly heavenly experience. And you can experience these levels of the afterlife during your astral projections.
You've seen angels?
Yes, I have.
Talk about that. It interests me a lot.
Sure. My first time seeing an angel was pretty incredible. It was unexpected. It was in the early years of my travels. I left my body, and I used a technique to raise the frequency of my consciousness to enter a higher dimension. And I flew through my house, I flew through the wall, and I emerged into the outside environment. And the first thing I see is an angel just floating up right in front of me. And it was such a beautiful being, just like emanating with this heavenly radiance. It's really hard to describe, but here's the thing. At the time, I didn't quite believe in angels and demons. I didn't really have many beliefs in a general sense about the afterlife, spiritual things like that. And so it wasn't like, I expected to see this entity, and so I saw it. It was a total surprise. And I felt this love emanating from it, and it just flew right up into the sky. And I've had other encounters since then with angels. One of them was kind of ridiculous, because this angel, this entity, was probably, 200 or 300 feet tall. It was just massive, enormous. And I had never seen an entity this big before. And, through my experiences, it seems that the angels are essentially just like enormously powerful spiritual entities that exist in these higher dimensions.
Any contact, verbal, mental, any connection?
Not so much, no. You see, when you're out in these higher dimensions, there's, I mentioned this, there's the type of connection that you experience where it kind of transcends words and that level of communication, and you experience just kind of like an understanding and kind of like a direct link with truth and with knowledge. And so during these experiences, I'll typically have that level of connection where I know that this is a higher level spiritual entity, and sometimes I'll feel a sense of bliss like radiating from it. And a lot of times that's all you really need to know to understand the nature of these beings. And I think they probably do communicate with people verbally. And I've had experiences over the years where I received communications and I'm not sure who is actually communicating with me. I'm just aware of the content of what is being communicated. And so, maybe these are angels or some other entities. But yeah, they're definitely out there. And, it's not like, I was never really a religious person, so I didn't go out there expecting to see these religious figures, but they're out there.
It must be shocking at times to all of a sudden see, especially if you see an angel that's 200 to 300 feet high, whatever. But to me, it would be more shocking if I had the realization that they knew I was there. If they noticed me, they could see me and they're looking at me and they're like, how did you get here? Type of a look. Have you ever had that experience? Because to me, it seems like you're not expecting to see them, and it's a really big possibility that they're not expecting to see you either. And all of a sudden you manifest yourself out of a cloud or however it happens. It's got to be shocking to another being. Have you ever experienced that? What's that been like?
I've never experienced another entity or being out in these other dimensions, like being shocked or surprised at my presence. But how it works is essentially the same way it works in this physical dimension. So you're walking down the street, the person passes you, and typically you're aware of one another because you're sharing the same reality, And so that's how it happens in these other dimensions. So it's not like you're kind of a ghostly figure and the other entities out there can't perceive you, because if you can perceive them, that means that you're locked in at the same level of reality as them. So they perceive you too. And, typically I'll have interactions with these entities, which, further shows that, there is shared, perception there.
Really interesting. So have you ever wondered if you could bring them back? And could you bring them back non-intentionally? All of a sudden, boom, you did something. You opened a door. Is it possible?
Well, I will interpret this as meaning kind of attract an entity from another level of reality to you in some way, in that they have some kind of effect, maybe on your physical life, or maybe on your non-physical explorations. Like I mentioned, I was stalked for some time by these alien entities, and this was a strictly out of body experience. not, as far as I know, they had no contact with me in the physical world. It was strictly out of my body. But yeah, I do believe that that there can be some type of influence exerted from these higher levels of reality down onto us here in the physical dimension. And I do think it's possible to attract that in certain ways. And, I've had experiences of being pulled out of my body, essentially against my will. And sometimes it was these alien entities. And so perhaps, I don't know if I attracted them to me in some way, or they were attracted to me for some other reason. But and you hear other stories of people, being possessed by, demons or whatever you want to call them, these other level entities with some kind of malicious intent. And, you even hear of people claiming to be channels. And so they connect with these higher level spiritual entities and, relate information to us people here in the physical world. And so, these types of interactions continue and they tend to build relationships. And so, yeah, there's definitely that possibility, both negative and positive.
So in the interest of clarification, we have what we're calling orange aliens. So are they from another planet? Yes. Or are they from another planet, another dimension, or from another place altogether?
I don't know. I do not know. What I know is that they operate in these astral dimensions, and they seem to like me for some reason, maybe for the wrong reasons. But I've had experiences with other groups of aliens. You can call them aliens. I call them aliens simply because they look like typical aliens. So I've had experiences with one group which actually had like a light blue skin color, and this group was actually like I would consider a higher level, like more evolved group of entities, and actually they shared this knowledge with me during this one particular experience. And a lot of the knowledge, a lot of this, it was like a download of information. And, a lot of it seemed to be beyond the reach of my conscious mind to truly grasp it, because we were in such a higher dimension. It seemed like there was just no way to correlate what I was being told with what I understand here in physical concepts. But one thing I did get from this interaction was that in a previous time before this physical life that I'm living, I made a type of agreement with them to have a relationship with them during this physical life. Some people call it like a soul contract, something like that. But I was told this, but not just told this, but I was remembering, I had the memories of entering this agreement with them before this life. And so, like I said, it's not just someone telling you something or you seeing a document. It's like having the full experience, like reliving the experience from a previous time. And so a lot of times these experiences, you hear someone say something like, oh yeah, I was told that it was a soul contract in this higher dimension. Well, it's not just like they showed you the piece of paper and they say, here, take my word for it. It's like you relive this experience, and it's something that there is no doubt in your mind that it's true, but you're never going to be able to prove it to someone here in this physical world, because these are experiences beyond the physical reality. I think to to demand physical proof for something beyond the physical world doesn't make a lot of sense.
You also wrote to me and mentioned ghost hauntings. Describe that, and what did you mean by ghost hauntings?
Yeah, there was this one period in my life where we had a haunting situation, and it seemed to be beyond just my own astral projections. But the situation was that my wife and I had recently moved into a condominium, and the previous owner was an old lady who had passed away, and I began having experiences with what seemed like the ghost of an old lady. And this initial encounter was particularly frightening. It was like I woke up at night and I felt this energetic sensation in my side. And when I looked, there was some kind of energy kind of attached to me. And coming up from this energy, I looked up, and it was this old, nasty looking ghost lady. And she, I was laying in bed on my back, and she was parallel to my body, just floating over me. And the moment I could tell this, the moment she realized I was aware of her, her mouth opened up and she let out this screech, and it was so crazily scary. Like I'd never experienced anything like this before. And I felt this energy digging into my side, and it seemed like she was almost sucking energy out of my body. And eventually I started to put the pieces together, because we've had other experiences in the same condominium where my wife would wake up with hand marks on her arms, like these red handprints, like someone had been squeezing her arms for like an extended period of time. And, it certainly wasn't me, and it wasn't her. And, occurrences like this all in the same time period in this place where this old lady had died, and, experiencing this old ghost type lady, you put the pieces together, and it seems likely that it could be some kind of, haunting or, ghost encounter.
I'm not an expert, but this comes to mind from time to time when I hear stories similar to yours, which yours is rather unique in ways. But then again, I know people who have done the same thing. But I've done shows and interviews and have friends who deal with this, and it's demonic possession. I'm not saying that you're possessed, but have you ever looked into that and have drawn any parallels? Just because there are people who enter this dimensional realm that's so different than ours, and just have these horrendous experiences, basically kind of start out the same way you did, but their experiences are more extreme. And you talk to somebody who does know this, and they have explanations for that, including explanations for what you have. But have you looked into that part of it? I know you didn't come from a religious background, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, definitely. I have researched demonic possession over the years. I never had any real indications that that's the case here. A lot of times I hear stories of, someone maybe opening the metaphorical door to some kind of spiritual entity, and it takes a turn for the worse. And typically what happens is there's some kind of really negative psychological or physical result. Maybe some kind of dementia or psychosis, or even more extremely, kind of their physical body being taken over and them acting out in these insanely violent ways against their will. And so nothing like that has ever happened to me. But yeah, I do think it is a possibility. And I do warn people, you should go about these types of practices with caution and never invite any entities, into your life without, without caution. Essentially, you don't want to just send an open invitation out. I've done this, on occasions. I've been in a deep meditative state, and I've just called out, take me out of my body. And sometimes I was grabbed and pulled out of my body, and where these entities grabbed me, I felt it on my ankles. And this is not my physical body, right? This is, the astral body, the spirit body, whatever you want to call it. But I felt actual pain where they were grabbing me. And that immediately told me these are not positive, benevolent entities. And yeah, they're out there. You definitely need to be careful.
When this happens, are you able to see your earthly physical presence, or is that a totally different place and a different time? Can you look back and see yourself lying there?
Mm-hmm, sure. Well, basically, the closer you are to the physical dimension, like the closer the astral dimension is to the physical dimension, the more of the physical world is reflected energetically into this higher dimension. And so in the lower dimensions, you will see yourself lying in bed, and the environment will typically look almost identical or a lot like the physical world. And the higher or the farther you get from the physical dimension, the more things begin to change. They get more unique and more abstract, and the less the physical world is reflected into these other realities. So yeah, typically, especially in the beginning of your practice, you'll leave your body and you'll be able to see your physical body lying in bed. Only you're not actually perceiving the physical dimension. You're already in the astral dimension, and you're essentially seeing almost like an energetic reflection of your physical body there in the bed. It's not actually the physical body.
So some of that perception, earthly perception, is left behind because you're in a different state. And you mentioned soul. So to me, I'm wondering, what term did you use? You said to actually not sell your soul. What was the terminology you used? Share your soul? Contract. Something about the contract.
Soul contract.
Soul contract.
Soul contract. Okay.
Sorry, I'm going somewhere else with that. But so you are you talking about the soul of a human that we would read about in the Bible, that kind of soul, or is it something different? Is that a different thing altogether than when you use the term soul? Is it the soul that we're used to hearing about, or is it something different?
Well, I think there can be different ideas of what the soul is. And so when I say soul, what I'm referring to is the highest level of our spiritual being, essentially on the level of the higher self. So by soul, I don't mean, okay, you have an out-of-body experience and we have a physical body. When you project from the body, you have a type of energy body or a spirit body or an astral body, call it what you want. But this body that you occupy during these astral projections, this is not what I consider the soul, because like I said, we are so much more than just, this physical body and even just the astral body. And so, yeah, I believe the soul is more of a higher level. Typically we don't have a full connection with this higher level of who we are, unless you can enter these higher dimensions and experience it firsthand. But yeah, typically the soul is way beyond what most people would imagine it to be.
Are you doing this now? And do you continue, or do you plan on continuing this? And if so, why?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I can't stop even if I wanted to. After a while, it just becomes like second nature. It's like dreaming. Like, can you stop your dreams? After a while, your consciousness just begins to naturally enter these higher states. And so I don't imagine it will ever stop. And I don't want it to stop because, there's always something new to learn and explore. And, this reality that we live in is just infinitely vast, and we can never truly know everything there is. So I'm just going to keep exploring and learning all that I can while here. And then, after this physical life, just keep going at it,
Sure. Obviously your neighbor, or if you have neighbors, I don't know if you have neighbors or not, but they probably don't do this. They probably have a vastly different lifestyle than you. And of course that's fine. But is there something physically different about you that allows you to do this, or can anybody do it?
Yeah, there is nothing special about me. The reality is that everyone projects into these higher dimensions every time they go to sleep. And the difference is whether you're aware of it or not. And essentially, astral projection is nothing more than learning to remain consciously aware during this process that, like I said, happens naturally every time we go to sleep. And, so the typical technique to achieve this state is to keep your mind awake as your body falls asleep. And it's really nothing more than that. And so more than just saying this as a theory, you can experience the fact of this through experimentation. You can, for example, see another person fall asleep, and you can watch their energy body project from the body. Or you can, become aware of multiple levels of your consciousness simultaneously. Because really what happens is we don't just project into one particular dimension. The reality is so much more complex than that. What happens is that we project into multiple levels. It's like layer upon layer simultaneously. And so what we experience typically during an astral projection is just one of these levels, one of these layers. But you can learn to shift your consciousness between multiple layers, not just sequentially, but simultaneously, and have the experience of being in more than one dimension at the same time. And it seems like kind of a mind fuck, pardon my French, but
I would think so.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this is something that I've been thinking this whole time, and it's a good time to ask it. Have you ever run into anybody else, any humans? I mean, other than your great grandmother, but I mean, just accidentally bumped into humans.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've had multiple experiences with my wife out of body, and she's had experiences with me out of body. And she doesn't practice this, but I think just, we've been together for, over 15 years now, just over time. And, her hearing about my experiences and learning things from me, she's had her own experiences spontaneously without even trying. And so sometimes, she will have an out-of-body experience, and the thing is this: you can encounter other people who are physically alive, friends, family, people down the street, but like I mentioned before, we experience multiple levels of reality simultaneously, but we're not aware of all of them. We're like right now, we're locked into the physical dimension, right? But we also have all these higher aspects of our consciousness, which are locked into other higher levels of reality and having a type of experience in these other dimensions that we're just currently unaware of. And like I said, it's not just theory, but you can learn to experience this, as a firsthand truth. And so what has happened is she has had experiences where she leaves her body, and I will be guiding her. And what it is, in my opinion, it's another level of my consciousness kind of assisting her. And so she comes back and she tells me, like, oh, you told me to do this and I did it, and then I left my body, and then you took me to this place. And from my perspective, I've experienced her multiple times. I leave my body and I'll see her energy body or her spirit body just floating above her physical body. So she's sleeping, and then I kind of like shake her up out of it, and we go on these adventures, right? But the thing is this, a lot of people have asked me over the years, oh, can you come and pull me out of my body so I can have my first out-of-body experience? But it doesn't work like that, because you need to be consciously aware of the experience, and no outside force can make you consciously aware. So even if I come to your house and pull you out of your body, I can't trigger your lucidity to actually remember that experience, right? So a lot of times, two parties involved in any given experience won't have that level of consciousness in sync. So usually one or the other will remember, and the others, maybe it'll be like a dream to them, or maybe they'll have no idea whatsoever.
Wow. Vincent Field. The book is called Astral Projection and Lucid Dreaming, Spiritual Revelations and Out-of-Body Experiences in Higher Dimensions. I'm going to put that link in the podcast notes if you're interested. It's available at Amazon.com. I want to thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on the show. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Good night.